I think there's a number of risks you can look at when you're talking about corporate tax behaviour, and when we're looking at it as investors, so we're wanting companies to engage in a certain amount of tax planning, so we don't want them to be paying more tax than they have to, but concerns do arise where they're undertaking perhaps particularly artificial or aggressive tax optimisation strategies, and they're the ones where they're operating a little bit closer to where they're open to challenge by regulations. So if a particular arrangement was deemed unacceptable or regulations were to change, then you've got a potentially very material financial risk of future earnings on their valuations. We'd also look at risks from a more market-based point of view. So are there potential distortions in the market that are being driven by tax avoidance practices? So are there incentives that multinationals are able to take advantage of that perhaps companies operating on a local or a national scale, they're not able to take advantage of those? And then, of course, we are quite concerned about the broader kind of risks to society. So this kind of notion, I hesitate to say kind of paying your fair share, because I think fair share is a bit of a loaded concept, but of corporations having a responsibility to support the social infrastructure that they themselves rely on. So I think there's a whole range of different perspectives that you can look at this lens of tax risk from. The range and nature of risks that will face companies to do with their tax practices will really vary according to the type of organisation and the sector it's operating in. So if you look, for example, at a company in the extractive sector, for them, kind of managing their tax affairs in a responsible way might be to do with their ability to continue to win licences from host governments. For a more consumer-facing company, then reputational risk might actually be a factor. But then, as we've seen today from the survey results, there is a little bit of a disconnect between what is reality and what is the perception of companies. So you've got that importance of kind of managing expectations, increasing transparency to ensure that if there were to be a scandal in the news, that stakeholders have got a source of information on how responsible that company is being in its tax affairs. I think the question of tax shifting from being perceived solely as a risk to being a source of opportunity and value, that's something that's really interesting, and it's something that we're beginning to see an emerging awareness of with companies. I think for a lot of them, it's a bit of a learning curve. So for many companies, they've only just begun to get comfortable with kind of talking about tax publicly. They may not have begun to consider the links between their approach to taxation and their approach to responsible business or sustainability. And I think there's a little bit of a culture shift required in order to kind of join those dots internally and to be able to report more effectively. And I think a lot of it does come down to transparency. So we see a kind of a drive across all the different factors of how a company might interact with society and the environment. We see a drive towards transparency, and consumers and other stakeholders really expecting this increased disclosure. And I think for companies, it's encouraging them to think about how they can most effectively communicate. So what information do they need to provide, and to who are they trying to provide that to?